Good afternoon, everybody. This is another episode of the Sunday Dinner Podcast. We have Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. Just a few things about him. He's a founder of Identity Talk Consultant, educational consultant, teacher development specialist, urban school educator, father, and husband. Everybody just give it up for Kwame. Yeah.
Man, thank you for having me, Travis, man.
So thank you
Appreciate
for
it.
joining me. Thank you for joining me, especially during the times right now. I can't wait to dig into this podcast. One thing I didn't tell you that me and somebody else had a conversation about this podcast last night, and it brought some insight to what y'all really do, and
Mm.
hopefully you could bring this insight into people that's watching this. So jump off to the first question. What is your area of expertise?
So my area of expertise is in education generally, but to be more specific, I specialize in teacher development.
Okay.
So a lot of the work that I do is focused on helping teachers be better instructors, helping them be better in terms of managing student behaviors, and really understanding why they want to go into the field of education. Because a lot of teachers, they go into it because they had a mother or a father or a family member who went into education, so they want to follow in their footsteps, but they don't
Okay.
have their own purpose for doing this work. So a lot of the work that I do through my company is really focused on helping educators develop knowledge of self through their practice.
Okay. Okay. How long have you been in the educational field?
I've been in the educational field for 15 years total. I've taught in the states of Pennsylvania and most recently Massachusetts, where I'm currently based, primarily as a middle school math teacher.
Okay. How long you been on? What part of Massachusetts?
I'm in the greater Boston area.
Oh, nice, nice. I always wanted to visit. That's one of my bucket list vacations that I always wanted to go to was Boston and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So you say you teach middle school math, correct?
yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So tell me a little bit about, or tell me about Identity Talk Consultant LLC.
Sure, I'll give you the abridged version of it. So, a couple years ago, when I was still teaching, I just had this crazy idea to write a book because at the time there were a lot of things going on within my school community that just didn't sit well with me. I saw a lot of teachers not treating the students well. My principal and the leadership, they weren't holding certain teachers accountable for the way they were treating students. And I just felt like there was a difference in treatment between the teachers who are holding up their weight in the school and then those who are kind of slacking off and not really putting in that same effort. And I felt like I was working harder than some of those teachers, but yet I was expected to still do more. And you're a veteran. When you're in the army, it's all about teamwork and having that synergy. Cause when you go out to the field, right,
Hmm.
and you're doing all these different tasks, you want to make sure that every person understands their role and their responsibility so that nobody gets hurt or loses their
Yeah.
life, right?
Okay.
So if you translate that to education, being in the school community, we all have different roles. We all teach different grade levels, different subjects, different content matter, but yet we all have specific roles that we have to play in order for the school to function properly and to have a positive school culture. So when certain individuals aren't holding up their weight in regards to that, it impacts the entire community. And that's what essentially left me very frustrated. So when it was time for me to go on paternity leave, because my wife was about to give birth to our son, who's now almost 3 years old,
Congratulations.
thank you. I decided to write a book.
Okay.
And the name of my book was Shape the Teacher Identity, 8 Lessons That Help Define the Teacher in You. And I wrote this book because I wanted to let people know that in order for you to do this work as a teacher, you have to develop a sense of self. You have to know who you are. It's more than just going to school to get your degree and your teaching license. You have to go through a self exploration process with your own life in order to extract those qualities that will define who you are. So, how you were brought up, the neighborhood you grew up in, your culture, your race, everything, those all come into play when you're talking about identity and who you are, not just as a human, but more specifically who you are within the context of an educator. So I wrote that book. And if you look at the name of the company, Identity Talk, it all stems from the first book because the whole foundation of the business is about knowledge of self, helping teachers develop knowledge of self so that they can stay true to the teacher in you. That's the motto of it. So when I wrote my book, I went ahead and started doing workshops in different school districts and universities within the greater Boston area. And then eventually I started to venture out into other states and cities within the nation to spread the word about the content from my book, but also to do workshops and seminars with teachers, both veteran and new teachers in the profession. And it just grew from there. So
Nice, nice. To piggyback off of what you just said, shaping the identity. Tell me about the book and how it turned into a workshop and an online course.
yeah. Hold on, I'm about to show you something.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So with this book here, right?
Can you
This
bring it
book,
closer to the camera so
of
people
course,
can see?
yes.
All right.
I
And can
know
you
this
read that
book.
to me?
It says Shape the Teacher Identity, 8 lessons that will help define the teacher in you.
Okay, where can they find this book at?
They can find it on my website, identitytalkforeducators.com, or they can go on Amazon to purchase a copy.
And all this information that you just said will be connected in a link in the bio below when they watch this video.
Absolutely. So, to answer your question about the course, the program, so I recently put together a program based on the book called Shaping the Teacher Identity 101,
Okay.
which is basically a virtual program that will help primarily new educators coming into the profession develop their teacher identity so that they can define their missions within the education field. So within this program, we focus on helping teachers develop tools and strategies that will help them have success with students in the classroom. We talk about culture responsive teaching and pedagogy so that they can teach in multicultural settings, which is very common in our school systems, just the ability to be able to teach with people of different races, particularly people who do not come from the same background as you. We also focus on professional development in terms of developing a network of mentors, understand the importance of continuing to grow in your craft as a teacher, taking courses to get continuing education credits and continuing to further your practice to another level. And just essentially, really just helping teachers develop that profile so that when they come out of this program, they know exactly who they are and how they're going to navigate this space as they move forward because the ultimate goal is for them to achieve success, sustained success, and longevity in the education field. So that's the ultimate goal when they go through this program is to have those tools in place to have that type of success.
Okay. So basically what you're telling me was that teachers come in there for all different reasons. As far as same as the military, they come from their parents was in the military, their grandparents were in the military, but they really don't know their purpose as far as why they want to serve in the military as far as for self. And I'm guessing what you're saying is the same correct thing, right? So, a lot of people come in the military, for example, for patriotism because their parents did it. Some come in for money for school education, but they never really come in for the sake of knowing themselves. And with that, it's a high turnover rate because they get in and they figure out, oh, this is not for me. I didn't know it was going to be this hard. So I can picture it being the same way for teachers as well. I
Mm-hmm.
coming from a family of teachers, coming from a family of educators, um, and you want to do something else. So I'm gonna ask you this: why do you think teacher turnover rates are so high, and how have the pandemic affect those numbers?
Oh man, that's an excellent question, and there's so many answers for this question. The first thing I will say is with regard to the high turnover rates for teachers, I think part of it is lack of preparation or limited preparation. You have a lot of teacher candidates who go into the classrooms for the first time not being fully prepared to take on the roles and responsibilities of being a teacher. Um, a very prime example of this are students or teacher candidates who are of European descent or Caucasian who go into urban settings to teach, but yet they don't know how to interact and cultivate positive relationships with their students of color in those settings. And as a result, it may lead to classroom management issues such as not being able to control the students' behavior, not being able to build those relationships with their families so that when a student is failing, they're able to have that conversation with mom or dad or uncle or aunt so that they can work together to solve those issues. So I think one reason why there's a high turnover rate is because of the lack of preparation for new teachers. Teacher ed programs in different colleges and universities have to do more, especially when it comes to teaching teachers how to be more culturally responsive to their students, but also understanding how to inject that concept into the curriculum and what they're teaching. Another thing that I've noticed is just, especially for teachers of color, black males in particular, teaching isn't the most lucrative job. You don't get paid a whole lot of money to be a teacher. Even though I'm in the state of Massachusetts where teachers get paid relatively well compared to many states, in the grand scheme of things, I'm still underpaid based on my worth and what I'm able to do. And that's the case for pretty much every teacher. So a lot of people opt for more lucrative career options that'll get them more money. And obviously, if you're being a teacher, you're not going into it because you are trying to be rich. You go into it because you're passionate about children. You want to make a difference in their lives. And that's the primary reason why many people do this work. But as you grow and you have a family, you have a wife or a husband, or you have children, you might own a house where you have to pay mortgage. Sometimes a teacher's salary is not going to cut it. And I'm sure you've heard stories of teachers taking 2, 3, 4 jobs outside of their 9 to 5 in order to provide for their families and pay for their mortgage, pay the electric bill, the water bill, um, help out another family member who's financially struggling. So the money is another reason why the turnover rates are high and teachers don't stick around longer than they should. And then one more thing is for the lack of career advancement. So when you go into education,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in a school district, a public school district, you come into the system at a certain wage, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the sake of just for example, let's say that the coming in rate for a new teacher is $50,000.
Okay.
That is if they have a 4-year degree.
This must be up north. Okay.
Right. Exactly. See, up north it's
This
50.
must
Cause I
be
know down south
up.
it's a lot cheaper. But think
Yes.
about it though. In South Carolina, where you are, the cost of living is not as high as it is here in Boston, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can afford to live off of maybe $30,000 or $40,000 because it's a different type of living out there. Like you don't need a whole lot to own a house compared to up here.
Yeah.
But that's another conversation. But getting back to example, let's say that's 50,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
Starting point. And most school districts have a collective bargaining agreement with a teacher union or some other entity that advocates for teachers to make sure they get paid properly or a fair wage, right? Every year you get a certain percentage increase in your pay every year in the district. But you also get paid more money if you take on more classes. So basically, the higher your education goes, the more money you can get.
Okay.
So for teachers that decide they want to get a master's, which has become the new minimum for teaching, you get more money once you get your master's. If you end up going for a doctorate degree, you get more money for getting a doctorate, in addition to the money that you're already getting annually with each increase, percentage
Okay.
wise, right? So it's like two raises. And then let's say you take a whole bunch of postdoctorate courses, that's going to add on to your increase, right? So if you're starting at 50,000, and let's say at step 25, because each increase is a step in the pay scale. Let's say at step 25, the cap is $80,000, hypothetically. Once you reach that cap as a teacher, you can't get paid any more than $800. That's it. That's your ceiling. So now, let's say that you're that teacher that's $80,000 worth. You want to move on to a new school within the district, and there aren't a whole lot of opportunities for leadership. The person who's going to look to hire you is going to think to themselves, you know what? Can I afford this person at $80,000? Yes, this person might have 2 or 3 degrees. They might have 2 licenses for teaching, and they're more than qualified for the job. But looking at my budget, do I want to allocate that much money to one teacher when I can go ahead and hire a first or second year teacher who I could pay half of that money to and still have 40,000 to give to somebody else? I don't know, you following me?
Yeah, I'm following you.
So basically, you hit a ceiling within your district where you can't get paid anymore, and the more qualified you are, the harder it is to find a regular teaching job, because naturally people who teach in the classroom for a number of years, they ultimately advance into school leadership or administration, right? So if you're that teacher that just can't find a job because you're overqualified, now you're in a position where you're trying to figure out what to do next. And I've had a lot of friends who found themselves in that situation. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to leave my school district to start my business, because I knew I would hit that dead end at some point. And I wanted to have life, an extended lifeline,
Mm-hmm.
as a business person, so that I can continue to earn more money and not be confined to a system that wouldn't allow me to get the maximum amount of money that I should get for my work. So I think the lack of opportunity and the lack of pay and all those things I mentioned, they all contribute to these high turnover rates. That's why you see so many teachers leaving. And then also it's COVID. It's COVID-19. And especially down the South, whether it's Georgia, whether it's Florida, they're asking teachers to come into the school and teach the kids, knowing that the COVID rates, particularly in those states, are super high. So you're asking the teacher to risk their life and teach these kids. And so you have some teachers who are like, you know what, I'm going to just go into early retirement. You know what, I'm not going to risk my life, because I've already seen some teachers pass away because they went into a school building because the school system told them to, and because of the high prevalence of COVID-19, they catch the virus and they're dead within 2-3 days. So if you see that happening in other parts of the nation, you're not going to take that risk, especially if you're trying to protect your family. So some teachers have decided, you know what, I'm going to just quit my job and do something else, because I'm not risking my life to, I'm not gonna put my life at risk and my family at risk, essentially.
Definitely understand that. I kind of went into my next question of how the pandemic affect teacher educators and students as a whole. So, like I was telling you early in the beginning of the interview, I had a conversation with a mentor of mine, and he was helping his niece um, with the way school system is now online teaching. So I'm gonna ask you, as far as a teacher perspective, and as far if you can give little tips or nuggets to parents dealing with kids, my son as well, um, home teaching. As far as everything being online, you go to class for a few days, and so I know a lot of parents are struggling with doing a 9 to 5, or might have a second job, but also now the kids are home and they learn it online. And if they can't get it, it's difficult because you're not physically in the classroom where maybe you can ask a question or get that one-on-one help. Or so, how has the pandemic affected those of parents that now is homeschooling, home teaching, and then also some tips for parents if they have questions or questions parents should ask that they don't even know how to ask or know what to ask in the aspect of the pandemic and teaching kids at home and living a 9 to 5. Any tips and nuggets that you have for that?
Yeah, and I think it depends on the grade level of your child. I,
Okay.
I think I think if you have a child who is in the early elementary grades, whether they're in kindergarten all the way through to maybe third grade, that's going to be tough, especially if they come from a family where mom and dad are working a lot of hours to provide for the family and not always around
Mm-hmm.
to help that child. And that's a real situation in many homes, right? So I think in that situation, I would just say, for one, everybody has to show each other grace. Teachers should show parents grace. Teachers should also show children grace. Students should show teachers grace, and parents should show teachers grace. We all need to have a grace period so that we can really get acclimated to this new space, because you have a lot of veteran teachers who are now doing virtual learning for the very first time, and they're still getting their feet wet. And I know that they had some experience during those last 3 or 4 months of last school year, but they're still learning as they're going. So there are going to be some bumps along the road. But what I do hope that parents start doing is, continue to advocate for your child. Ask questions to their teachers in order to get some clarity around what's going on, and also give the teachers the space to work with your child, because I think there's some parents who are very involved, as they should be, but sometimes it's to the detriment of their child, where the child's in the middle of a lesson You have that parent that wants to have a parent-teacher conference in the middle of the lesson while the teacher's trying to teach the 19 or 20 other kids who are there. So I think we do need to show some grace here. Um, and it's really, and this question is difficult to answer because there are so many types of children. You have children that have special needs. You have children who are autistic. You have children who have learning disorders that require them to have a learning support plan or an IEP or some type of behavior plan. In those instances, you definitely want to be very aware of what's going on and continue to reach out to those teachers, because now teachers are more than ever expected to maintain those communication lines with parents, especially now that everybody's virtual. You would think that it would be easier to connect with a teacher in this new space as opposed to how it was when we were all inside a school building and you had some parents who weren't able to go to that after school parent teacher conference at the school or the back to school night. Now that everything's virtual, it provides easier access for parents to have those conversations with students, but also with the teachers and the principals. So I think it's made it easier for parents in that regard. But every student has a different situation they're coming from. So I think that's what makes it a bit challenging for school districts, because you have some students who are pretty well off, and then there are some who might not have the support system they need in order to be successful. Hello?
Yeah, hello.
Yes.
Yeah, your camera froze up a little bit,
All
but no,
right.
I was able to hear you. I was able
All right.
to. So even though your face froze, we were still able to hear what you were saying.
Okay.
So parents definitely, like I said, just from God giving me that insight last night, and for some reason, my mentor called me late at night, and then I had a podcast about it the next day, which he didn't know. Um, was like, on the flip side, okay, what do parents need to know? Because I know it's difficult for parents just as well as teachers and everybody else involved. And a lot of parents are frustrated. I work with a lot of parents that have kids that are working two jobs. And just like I said, this aspect hits every level.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if you're poor class, middle class, high classes. If you're working, you don't have the time because before, the regular system, your child went to school and the school dealt with that. Now they home and now you trying to work from home and also teach your child and mentor your child and guide your child. Are there any programs out there for right now as far as like tutoring, or what are they doing about that?
I know that there are a lot of teachers who are doing going above and beyond, and they're providing some tutoring sessions outside of the designated school hours.
Okay.
Um, I'm actually a tutor as well. So I actually tutor some fifth graders in math.
Okay.
Um, so you have some teachers who are doing that as well. So I know that there's some tutoring that's being offered, but as far as extra support for parents, there are some districts who are mandating that teachers have office hours for students as well as parents. Just like when we had office hours when we were in college and you go see your professor to get help on this assignment or to ask a question about class, it's the same instance here where the teacher is designating a window of time for parents to come on and ask questions. And even though that's great, some parents might not be able to attend those sessions because they may be working. So it's really difficult because, as you mentioned, it impacts all kinds of individuals. And every person comes in with a different situation. So there's really there really isn't one great answer that would cover all the different types of parents, all the different types of students that are within the different school districts. But I would just say this. If there are parents who are seeking more support, I would just say tutoring is definitely an option. And there are a lot of tutors out there who are looking to just take on some students and provide them with some support over the course of the school year. And you can find them via social media. There are groups of tutors who are available. And I think as far as just providing like more enrichment for students, I know there's some virtual programs that are available that focus on specific subjects, whether it's math, science, or even literacy with reading and writing. So there's a lot out there. So depending on what needs your child have, you want to find the right program that's most appropriate for them.
Thank you for those nuggets. Not gonna keep you long. Last part of the podcast and promotional section is how do people get in contact with you, follow you, any courses you want to inform them about, websites, merchandise. Just let the people know. Like so, also it will be in a bio link underneath this video on YouTube. But just let the people know how they can get in contact with you if they have further more questions that we didn't get a chance to get to on this podcast. How did it get it to you? Just not outside of Massachusetts and Boston. How can the people get in contact with you?
Oh man, so I'm very active on social media. So if people want to contact me directly, they could just type in my name, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah, on all platforms.
I'm gonna have a spell for everybody. This is the word. I'm gonna have a spell for everybody.
Cool. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm pretty much everywhere. Very active, so you can reach me there. As far as email, you can contact me at identitytalk4educators@gmail.com. Excuse me. And then as far as just, we have a lot of things going on. We just opened up a clothing shop, an online shop. So if people want to buy some teacher swag, some t-shirts, some hoodies with some positive messages for teachers, you can go to the Identity Talk apparel shop, which is on the Teesprings website, and I'll provide you with all the information so people know where to go.
Okay. Anything else you have for the people?
I would say for people who are thinking about getting into a business, I would just tell them to take inventory of what they are able to do. What are those gifts that you have that you can monetize? That's one. And then also, what is the need right now in our society? Because whatever you're deciding to do a business for, it has to address a need. So it's not always about what you want to do, it's about what the community needs. I think that's the most important thing that people need to understand in order to be successful in business. You want whatever you're trying to create, whatever you're trying to initiate, it has to address a need of the community. It has to address a specific population. And once you figure out what that need is, as well as the population, now you can start to move forward with the plan.
All
So I
right.
will say that.
Thank you again, Kwame, for joining my podcast. Thank you for being a guest. Thank you for all the insight. Thank you for the nuggets you guys gave us. Um, Thank you again. Like I said, I can't thank you enough, especially during this pandemic that we have going on, that you had the time to bless me and everything that you have going on with your life and your business and your family. Once again, thank you and have a great night.
Man, thank you for having me, Travis. And this is what we got to do.
Yeah,
We all trying to build our businesses and advance, and we can't do it if we don't build together and work together. So I'm all about that. So I appreciate you giving me the space to talk about what I love to do on your platform. So I appreciate you, man.
thank you, thank you. And like I said, Identity Talk Consultant LLC. Look for me over there because we're gonna set something up so I can be in your podcast as well.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Have a good night.
All right, you too.
All right.